I should have known something was off. The moment we stepped inside Nashville International Airport, my son, Mark, and his wife, Tanya, walked ahead of me as if they were models on a runway, confident, polished, and far too relaxed for people escorting a grieving woman on her first trip in years. I followed a few steps behind, clutching my purse like it was the only solid thing I had left. Just 2 months earlier, I had buried my husband, Jake. After 42 years of marriage, I thought grief would be like a storm. Loud, violent, overwhelming. Instead, it was a quiet thing. A shadow that sat with me in every room. When Mark suggested a family trip to help me breathe again, I believed him. I wanted to believe him. So I sold the last piece of jewelry Jake had gifted me. A simple but precious pearl set to help contribute to the tickets. We're all pitching in, Tanya had said, smiling sweetly. But I never saw a receipt. Never saw confirmation. I trusted them anyway. That trust cracked the moment the airline agent frowned at her screen. "Mom, your reservation doesn't show a return ticket." I thought maybe I misheard. "I'm with the Monroe family. There should be 3 adults and the kids." She checked again. Her eyebrows sank with a kind of polite dread. "Their return flights are confirmed. Yours is not here. It might have been canceled." Canceled? By who? Why? Why? My heart thudded painfully as I looked back toward my son and daughter-in-law. They were not panicked. They weren't even watching me. I approached them with the printed itinerary I'd held onto like a lifeline. "The return ticket isn't showing. Can you check yours?" Mark barely looked up, but Tanya turned, exhaling like she was tired of hiding something. "Oh, Blake," she said lightly. "We only bought you a one-way ticket. You'll figure out the rest later. You've got your phone." Her tone wasn't cruel. It was worse. Indifferent. "If you need bus money," she added, shifting her designer luggage, "sell your phone. Plenty of people do that." I waited for Mark to protest, to correct her, to defend me. He didn't. He didn't even meet my eyes. He simply mumbled, "It made sense this way, Mom," and followed Tanya toward security without another word. They walked away like I was something they'd accidentally brought and decided to leave behind. I stood there in the fluorescent glare of the airport, suddenly aware that I had no suitcase, no backup plan, and no place in the family I thought I still belonged to. But I wasn't entirely helpless. Inside my bra, right over my heartbeat, lay an envelope I had kept hidden for years. And inside that envelope was the beginning of a very different ending. Because the moment they abandoned me at that airport, they unknowingly set in motion the very thing that would cost them everything. I didn't sit down right away. I just stood there in the thick stream of travelers, holding the useless itinerary that had fooled me so completely. My hands trembled, but not from fear, more from the shock of realizing I had been written out of my family's plans long before I reached the airport. People say grief makes you fragile, but it also sharpens certain truths you used to ignore. Looking back, I saw every red flag. The way Tanya always spoke over me at dinner. The way Mark quietly deferred to her, even in matters of family tradition. The way the trip was planned so quickly, so neatly, without my input. And the most glaring clue of all, they insisted on keeping my luggage with theirs. Not because it was convenient, but because it kept me from walking away. So I moved to a metal bench against the wall, straightened my spine, and took a breath that tasted like swallowed humiliation. I wouldn't cry. Not here. Not for them. Instead, I reached inside my purse and pulled out my phone, the same phone Tanya suggested I sell for Greyhound money, as if I were a burden to be traded in for parts. I scrolled past family contacts I no longer trusted, past neighbors who meant well but gossiped too much, Past old friends whose numbers felt like dusty memories. Then I found the name I saved years ago. J.R. Lawyer. He wasn't just any lawyer. He had been Jake's friend long before I married into the Monroe name. A good man. Honest. The kind who looked you in the eye when he spoke. My thumb hovered over the call button. I felt foolish. Abandoned. But not defeated. Not anymore. J.R. speaking, came the steady voice after 2 rings. I didn't bother with small talk. I need to update my will, I said. That got his attention. His voice softened. Blake, are you all right? No. But I would be. And soon, I want to meet as soon as possible, I continued. Today, if you can. He didn't hesitate. Give me 2 hours, and Blake, whatever's happened, we'll get it sorted. I ended the call and exhaled. 2 hours. 2 hours to sit with the truth that my own family left me stranded without a suitcase, without a ticket, without a thought. 2 hours to understand that I had allowed myself to be treated as optional, disposable, easy to leave behind. But that time was over. I stood, adjusted my sweater, and walked out of the terminal with a quiet determination I hadn't felt in months. Maybe years. What they didn't know, what they hadn't even bothered to ask, was that Jake and I had always kept a backup plan. And today, I was finally going to use it. Because the moment I stepped into that lawyer's office, everything they believed they controlled began to crumble piece by piece. The cab ride to JR's office felt strangely calm, as if the city itself was giving me permission to breathe again. Nashville rolled by outside the window. Billboards, diners, old brick buildings, familiar but distant, like a memory I wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. I watched everything pass while holding onto the small envelope hidden in my purse, the break in case of emergency money Jake and I had quietly saved for years. Jake. I could almost hear him humming off-key beside me, gripping my hand the way he always did whenever life nudged us toward something uncertain. He used to say, "Prepare for the storms you can't see coming, Blake. They always arrive when the sky looks its prettiest." I didn't realize until now that Tanya's polite smile, the invitation to breathe at the beach, the sudden concern for my emotional well-being, they had all been part of a storm I never expected. By the time the cab pulled up outside a modest brick building with Monroe and Wade Law Office carved into a wooden sign, my heartbeat had settled. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was ready. The receptionist recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Monroe? He's waiting for you." Not a hint of pity in her voice. Not a single glance that suggested I was an inconvenience. I walked into JR's office, and the man looked older than I remembered, gray around the temples, glasses perched lower on his nose. But the warmth in his eyes hadn't aged a day. "Blake," he said, rising to greet me. "I didn't expect to see you under urgent circumstances." I sat down and folded my hands neatly. "I'd like to change my will. Completely." His brows lifted, but he nodded. "Tell me what you want." So I told him. Line by line, I removed Mark, removed Tanya, removed every trace of the future Jake and I once assumed they would honor. My voice didn't shake, not once. And JR, to his credit, didn't ask for explanations until the very end. "Can I ask what brought this on?" he finally said softly. "They left me at the airport," I answered, "with no return ticket, no luggage, and no intention of coming back for me. They abandoned me like I was extra baggage." JR's jaw tightened. "Blake, that's more than cruel. That borders on exploitation." "I know," I whispered, "and I won't fund people who see me as a burden." He leaned back. "Then let's make sure they never have access to a single cent of your estate." And he did. For the next hour, we rewrote everything. The house, the land, the savings, all redirected to an organization that supported abandoned seniors. Every signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When I stood to leave, JR placed the folder in my hands. "You're doing the right thing." I smiled. Small, but certain. For the first time in a long time. I know. Because while I was securing my future, my son and daughter-in-law were about to return from their vacation and discover the price of leaving me behind. By the time I reached the small motel I'd booked for the night, the weight of everything finally settled. Not like a burden, but like a decision. A firm one. A necessary one. I spread the new will papers across the bed, the ink still fresh, my name signed with a steadiness I didn't know I still possessed. All the assets Jake and I spent a lifetime building, the house, the farmland, the retirement savings, the investments, were now redirected to people who would actually value what they received. Not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted peace. After years of pouring myself into a family that saw me as an accessory, I was finally reclaiming my own life. The next morning, with the documents finalized and safely stored, I visited the bank. I opened a new safety deposit box in my name only. I changed passwords on accounts that still listed Mark as an emergency contact. When the teller asked gently, "Would you like to add a family member for access?" I answered without hesitation, "No, just me." 2 small words, but they felt like liberation. Then came the hardest part, returning to the house one last time. I arranged for movers from another county, people who didn't know my son, didn't know the family name, and wouldn't gossip. I didn't want explanations or questions. I wanted closure. The house looked different the moment I stepped inside. Smaller, dimmer, dight, as if it knew it no longer held a place in my life. I walked room to room, taking only what mattered. Jake's favorite chair, a box of our old photographs, my mother's quilt, the wedding album we looked through every anniversary. Not the fancy dishes, not the expensive furniture, not a single item tied to the people who had left me behind. Just memories, just the pieces of a life built on love, not convenience. I placed the house keys in an envelope on the kitchen counter with a short note addressed to no one in particular. "Do not call. Do not look for me. I'm exactly where I should be." Then I walked out without turning back. My next home, Willow Grove, sat 2 hours away. A warm place filled with sunlight, laughter, and faces that greeted me like I mattered simply because I existed. No expectations. No hidden agendas, just a community of people choosing kindness every day. They showed me to my room, a modest corner unit overlooking a courtyard where flowers were already beginning to bloom. The director placed a welcome basket on the table. Homemade jam to cham, crackers, a handwritten note. "What? We're glad you're here." Those 5 words meant more to me than anything Mark had said in years. I unpacked slowly, breathing easier with every drawer I filled. I wasn't running away. I was starting over. Because while I finally found peace at Willow Grove, my son was about to learn he had lost far more than he ever imagined, and he wasn't going to stay silent about it. 6 months passed before the ripple of consequences reached them. 6 months of quiet mornings at Willow Grove, sipping tea in the sunroom. 6 months of watercolor classes, book club debates, and evenings where someone always knocked on my door just to say, "Dinner's ready, Blake." 6 months of rebuilding the kind of life no one could take from me again. Then, one morning, an email from JR arrived with a simple message. "Notices have been delivered." That was the day everything shifted. At first, my phone buzzed gently. A single call from Mark. Then, another. Then 10 more. By the end of the day, he had called 16 times. No voicemails, no text, Just repeated attempts, like someone pounding on a locked door. I didn't answer. The next morning, the email arrived. Subject: I'm sorry, Mom, but can we at least keep the garden? I opened it out of curiosity, not sentiment. Mom, the message began. I don't know why you changed everything, but Tanya and I got the letter from the lawyer. You removed us from the will, from everything. The house is under review, the savings accounts are closed to us. Even the land behind the house, the garden. The kids planted trees there. They'll be devastated. He tried to sound remorseful, but his real concern bled through every sentence. The house, the money, the land, not me. He continued. Maybe we handled the airport situation wrong. Maybe it came across worse than we intended. Tanya swears it wasn't supposed to feel like abandonment. We just thought you needed time alone. But this is extreme. At least let us keep the land. The garden means something to us. My hands stayed steady as I read his words. They didn't mean something to me when I stood stranded in the airport. They didn't mean something to me when I cried alone after Jake died. They didn't mean something to me when I sold my pearls to pitch in. The garden he was begging for? The land he now claimed held sentimental value? It had already been designated for Elder Haven's horticulture therapy program. A place where older women with memory challenges could plant flowers, raise herbs, and heal. A true garden, one with purpose. Mark would never understand why that mattered more. Later that day, as I sat in Willow Grove's courtyard with a book on my lap, my friend Helen looked over and said, "You have that calm look again. The one people get when they finally stop apologizing for choosing themselves." I smiled, because she was right. I didn't send a reply to Mark's email. Some doors stay closed for a reason. Some endings protect us. Some silences are an act of survival. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of any of it. Because this wasn't just the end of what they did to me. It was the beginning of who I finally allowed myself to become.